Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Today on the program, of course, we are on YouTube at Stillman & Co. Like and subscribe. Whatever you're doing right now, stop what you're doing and hit like. And if you're subscribed, that's great. If not, hit subscribe. Thank you very much. So we got an absolutely loaded show today. I mean, there were so many different things that I wanted to put on there that I'm like, do we have time to get to that? Do we not have time to get to that? And so we're just going to let it fly. And what a wild day in college football yesterday was. College football is all kinds of fucked up. We'll get into that coming up today on the program. But of course, we have to start with the number one topic, and that is, of course, the development or lack thereof when it comes to the Tennessee Titans' number one pick, the franchise quarterback, the man that they unretired Warren Moon's jersey for, Cam Ward. And the Cam Ward fanboys, which I am now dubbing as the Cam Boys, they are having a tough time accepting reality. Even from the very start today on the program, Whitty, and you know I love Whitty with all my heart, but Whitty has to chime in at 1:33 today. So Whitty got to his computer or his phone or whatever, pulled up Stillman and Company 30 minutes before we went on the air and said, I agree with the guy that said the discourse with Cam is just way too toxic both ways, and I'm included in that. 10 games in, Cam is not a franchise guy, nor is he a bust. Oh, the Cam boys. Oh, the Cam boys are having a hard time with life. From Tic Tac Titan out there saying he rewatched the game, and after rewatching the game, Cam played great. To Justin Graver, whom Whitty was referencing, and I like Justin Graver a lot, posting a 6-minute monologue, which I did watch yesterday, by the way. Lindsay is sitting there next to me. She's like, why are you watching this? I'm like, I want to hear what he has to say. And Justin Graver posted a 6-minute monologue on Twitter about how we all should just be positive around Cam. We were all positive around Marcus Mariota. We need to be positive around Cam. And apparently the new battle that the Cam boys are waging is it's time for Xavier Restrepo to enter the lineup. That will make a difference. And I have to ask, why are the Cam boys having such a meltdown? Because the truth is, we are not seeing any progress from Cam. That's why. Blake Beddingfield, the former Titans director of college scouting, wrote yesterday in his game breakdown at paulkaharski.com, quote, I don't see Ward getting better each week. If anything, Blake writes, he is regressing because the opposing defenses now have a game plan against him, and he hasn't evolved his game to force changes to that plan. Fumbles and tip passes at the line of scrimmage and short passes to produce completions are not showing me a quarterback who is making positive strides. That is a former NFL scout who is saying right there, he's regressing. He's taking a step back. And that's not all Blake wrote. Blake wrote, quote, Ward missed Mason Kinsey and Alec Iomanner on wide open explosive yardage plays. A good quarterback must complete wide open passes. No shit. Again, this is where we are. Quarterback misses wide open passes, and we have got to make excuses because, again, the Cam boys cannot live with the idea that maybe Cam misses wide open passes because maybe Cam's just not that good. Blake continues. Ward is also getting more passes tipped at the line of scrimmage. His lack of height and sidearm angle makes it easier to have defensive linemen tip balls. Those tip passes are just as effective as having great corners breaking up passes. Again, Cam's short, and Cam likes to throw from the side. And so when you're short, and you're 6'1" and you're throwing sidearm, and the other team has NFL defensive linemen at 6'4", 6'5", it's a lot easier to get your hands up. You're already hurting yourself by putting the ball lower than it needs to be, but now you're putting the ball lower than it needs to be, and you're shorter than the defensive lineman, so they just always put their hands up, and they always tip passes. Blake said, Ward had another fumble. He has gained a reputation now. Going forward in his career, he will have defenses focused on getting the ball out every time a defender makes contact with him. Again, what did Cam Ward have at the combine? Small hands. That's another concern. And Blake said, quote, Ward completed passes to 9 different receivers, but only one had over 50 yards, and that was Chigakonkwo, who had a long of 39 yards late in the fourth quarter. All negatives. Now, he did have 2 positives when it came to Cam's performance. In his breakdown, once again, at paulkaharski.com. And I encourage, I heard Paul talking about this on his show saying, hey, this is the only place when he was pimping his site. And he's like, hey, this is the only place where you get these great breakdowns. And this is Blake Beddingfield's breakdown every Monday is a must read for me. The 2 positives that Blake wrote when it came to Cam. Quote, the 39-yard pass to Chigakonkwo with a pass rusher in Ward's face. The throw shows the ability to push the ball down the field and utilize one of his better playmakers in Okonkwo. So that showed us, that one play showed us Cam can throw the ball down the field to one of the handful of guys on his offense that belongs in the National Football League. And that's Chig. The other positive, and this is important, but it's not, in my opinion, the end-all, be-all of everything. The other positive Blake wrote was, quote, as inconsistent and lackluster as Ward can look, he doesn't let failure or bad play affect him during games. He continues to fight, compete, and attempt throws without much hesitation. That is a quality that can help him get better. Translation. Marcus Mariota would throw an interception, and he'd drop his head, and for the rest of the game, it was like, come on, Marcus, you can do it. Will Levis would do something stupid, and for the rest of the game, it was Will Levis going to try to throw a 500-yard pass to get you back in the game. Cam doesn't do that. Cam makes a mistake. Cam goes to the sideline, picks up the tablet, looks at the tablet, goes back on the field, keeps playing. Ryan Tannehill, for the most part, was pretty good at that, where Ryan Tannehill could make a mistake, and then Ryan Tannehill could go to the sideline and come back the next time and be okay because of it. But if you notice that the negatives are all physical traits and attributes, Ward can't hang on to the football. Why? Because he's got small hands. Ward can't throw over defenders. Why? Because he's short and has bad mechanics with the sidearm angle. And the positive is, well, Ward doesn't let much get him down. That's the problem with the positives versus the negatives that, again, an NFL scout is telling us, putting his name on it, by the way, and saying, I think Cam Ward is regressing. The problem with the negatives are that those are recurring issues. Ball security, arm angle, throwing mechanics. And again, as Blake said, a quarterback who's not making positive strides. On the other side of it, there is the one throw to Chig, which again was a beautiful throw. But when you have bad mechanics like Cam does, you're going to make a beautiful throw 1 out of every 10 passes, 2 out of every 10 passes. That's what happened during the preseason. Cam would make a pass that looked good in one of the preseason games of the 6 passes he'd throw, and people would say, oh my God, did you see that? And I'm like, right, but he's not using his feet. It's all arm. And when it's all arm, sometimes it'll get there, and most of the time it won't. I said this to somebody, and I can't remember who. Cam is like one of these baseball pitchers that I've seen for years where the organizations just fall in love with the fact that, hey, this guy's got a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And it's like, can he throw strikes? No. But we'll teach him how to throw strikes but he can throw 103 miles an hour, and we're going to get him. And then after about 3 years of him not throwing strikes, finally it's like, okay, go back down to AAA. Can't take this anymore. But the positives for Cam are one throw in the game and the intangibles that Cam gets up after getting kicked down. And I don't complain about Cam's intangibles because I do think they matter. I think being a leader matters. I think being a hard worker matters. I think being dedicated matters. The idea that he gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I think that's great. But those things don't matter if you're not good enough to put the ball where it is supposed to go. And that is the crux of the issue with Cam Ward. And instead of just sitting there and saying, well, let's not have a show today, folks. Let's wait 3 more years and then decide whether or not Cam Ward's any good. I don't believe in that. I like calling it as I see it. We have a show to do today, and we're going off the information that we have right now. And I call it like I see it. I see a young quarterback who has some talent, but not elite talent, not Anthony Richardson talent, not Trevor Lawrence talent, not Jaden Daniels talent, but he's got some talent, who works really hard and has been set up to fail by his organization. Unfortunately for him, he is failing, and he's got great determination. But Cam's not the only guy in the NFL who has determination to be a really good player or to be a really hard worker. Have you ever met Teddy Bridgewater before? Because I know Teddy Bridgewater. And the thing is, Teddy Bridgewater lacked injury luck. Of course, he had that big knee injury when he was in Minnesota. And he lacked the ability to change the game from the quarterback position. They gave him a chance in Carolina, and he won some games, and he lost some games. And they gave him a chance in Denver, and he won some games, and he lost some games. But he never consistently made the plays to win the game for his team. And that's why Teddy Bridgewater is a backup. And there's nothing wrong with that. Backups nowadays get their own commercials. But I didn't unretire Warren Moon's number for a backup. The Titans didn't turn down the Giants' Godfather trade offer, which, again, I have heard what PK reported, that it was 2 1s and 2 2s. I've also heard that the Giants didn't offer 2 number 1 picks, which Adam Schefter reported the night of the draft, that the Giants did offer 2 number 1 picks. So somebody's not telling the truth in that. But it sounds, I'm just going to believe that, they turned down the Godfather offer because they thought Cam was a franchise quarterback. The same reason that they unretired Warren Moon's number, because they thought he was a franchise quarterback. If you thought he was a backup quarterback, would you unretire Warren Moon's number? And to Justin Graver's point, wondering why this doesn't feel like 2015, the same as Marcus Mariota's rookie year. It's because Marcus Mariota was much better as a rookie quarterback than Cam Ward is right now. Marcus Mariota had the best debut in the history of the NFL. Marcus Mariota was a much higher regarded prospect coming out. He was the Heisman Trophy winner. He had been in the national title game. There's no telling what a quarterback is going to become in the draft. And we all recognize that. We all recognize that some of the guys that are number 1 picks, can't miss prospects, sometimes do miss. And that every now and then there's a Tom Brady or there's a Brock Purdy. But there are levels of prospects. Trevor Lawrence, let's use him as an example, because Trevor Lawrence has yet to become an elite franchise quarterback. But as a prospect, Trevor Lawrence was elite. Cam was never considered that, except by people like Justin Graver, the Cam boys, who got caught up in, this is our Patrick Mahomes, and made a video called The Perfect Quarterback Prospect, which had a half Mahomes face and half Cam's face. So they're convinced, the Cam boys, they were convinced throughout the draft process, and I think in large part because they wanted to believe it, they were convinced that Cam Ward was something that nobody except for Louis Riddick claimed he was. And the only reason that we all know Louis Riddick is the one who said that he reminded him of Mahomes is because Louis Riddick is the only one on the planet who said it. Which, by the way, was so funny. And now that Cam has proven that he's not what they thought he was, they being the Cam boys, they being, he's the next Mahomes. They're now telling us we need to be patient. Be patient. It'll change. You'll see. We need to embrace Cam. We need to. Part of the reason I feel like Titan fans are so hesitant to get on the Cam bandwagon, unlike the Mariota bandwagon, is because we lived through it with Mariota. That was 5 years of our lives. Robbie Stanley's listening to the show right now. I remember him texting me pretty much every day of the Mariota era, being like, Mariota sucks. And I defended it. I'm like, no. Marcus was not getting the right coaching. Marcus did not have the right staff around him. Marcus did not have good enough players. Marcus did not. And the second Marcus exited the lineup and Ryan Tannehill came in, it was a night and day difference. Why? Because Ryan Tannehill was better. And it was hard for me to accept that. So we lived through Mariota. And that was 5 years of our lives in which we were hoping and praying. And we're hoping and praying while we're watching Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson win league MVPs in year 2. So we've all been through it. We were just told by the Titans that they had a franchise quarterback in Mr. Mayonnaise himself, Will Levis, only to watch him completely bomb out. So I'm sorry if I don't feel like waiting until I'm 45 years old for us to know what I think Cam's limitations are already telling us every Sunday. Cam was overhyped. He has many flaws in his game. And the desire for the fans for him to become Patrick Mahomes isn't going to overcome the flaws that he has that are why he's not Patrick Mahomes. No matter how positive I am or other Titans fans are, and if you don't like it, that's fine. There are plenty of shows, there are plenty of networks, there are plenty of whatever that will tell you whatever you want to hear. But it is the truth. Don't you think it's pretty sad that right now the Cam boys are sitting there and they're using Sunday's game as an example of how, see, Cam's getting better. I watched the tape back the second time and Cam played much better. And yet in that game, PFF gave him a passing grade of 53.8. That's the game you're coming to me and saying, see, Jared. Again, a PFF passing grade of 53.8. Do you know what Davis Mills' passing grade was on Sunday? For everybody out there that watched the game, Davis Mills had a passing grade, according to PFF, of 81.5. 81.5. You guys are trying to unretire Warren Moon's number and to tell me to be patient about 53.8. And in the same game, Davis Mills had a much, much better passing grade. Davis fucking Mills. Here's something the Cam boys need to understand. It is what it is until it's not, and Cam has to prove that it is not. It's as simple as that. And the problem with Cam is there just aren't a lot of Sundays so far where he gives us examples of where he doesn't look like an overwhelmed, overhyped quarterback with flaws who's got a couple of nice clubs in his bag he can swing. So, again, I know you want Cam to be good. I want Cam to be good too. I am a season ticket holder to the Titans. I want Cam to be good. But we have got to slow down on this. This fan base is too toxic for Cam Ward to be any good. If this fan base is too toxic for Cam Ward to be good, try going to one of the prouder franchises, one of the more entitled franchises. Now, I do agree. I think there is some serious toxicity when it comes to this fan base, and I think ownership hears that, and it makes them do stupid things, like promote Rand Carthon or fire John Robinson in the middle of the season when they're in first place. But that's a different discussion for a different day. The truth is, if you want me to believe in Cam, you don't need to get on a podcast and tell me, just wait and see, you'll see. No. Cam needs to go out there on Sundays and show it to us. So that's the first thing. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. You know I absolutely love Hiller. They take great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. Hiller has been taking care of my home since I became a homeowner in 2018. Here's the thing about Hiller. Hiller wants to come out to your home. They want you to pay them, and then they don't ever want you to call them back for the same thing again, which is why they have 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be, the service is free. Because if they come out and they fix something right the first time and you don't have to call them back out there, the next time, which is inevitable, that something will go wrong, they know you'll call them, which is exactly what I do. It's real easy. I just go right on my phone to happyhiller.com and I set an appointment. They're usually there the next day, right in the 2-hour window that they say they'll be there. You can track the technicians. They leave your home cleaner than they found it. I know this. I am a customer. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians. They come into your home and they make it better. Care is their core value. They believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. And they are a proud supporter of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Call Happy Face Drop today. Okay, so before we get to your reaction on the Cam stuff, I do want to talk about the state of the roster. Because I would agree with most people out there who thinks that this roster is truly atrocious and the team stinks. And it is in large part because they have whiffed on so many decisions. Like Chigakonkwo was a starting tight end for the last 3 years. J.C. Latham with the 7th overall pick over a Brock Bowers. Lloyd Cushenberry as the big free agent acquisition at center over Tyler Biadasz, who was a better player. A guard with the 11th overall pick in a draft where Jackson Smith and Jigba was still on the board. I can go on and on and on. But there is this big prevailing thought amongst the Cam boys that nobody, including Tom Brady, the greatest player who ever lived, could succeed with this team. Everybody keeps saying, name a quarterback, Jared, who could come in here and be better than Cam Ward. Well, I can name a lot of those guys. Well, name a quarterback, Jared, who could come in here and make this team good. And the thing is I could name a quarterback, but as soon as I do, you'll tell me, no, he wouldn't be good on this team. And that's easy to say because there's no real way to know. There's no real way to know that if Tom Brady decided to come out of retirement and the Tennessee Titans decided to put him at quarterback, that Tom Brady wouldn't be better with this team or wouldn't have this team competing or whatever. I think guys like Brady, go look at the 2019 Patriots. That team sucked. They won the division because of Tom Brady. Go look at Brady's last year in Tampa Bay. That team sucked. They won the division because of Brady. I think Brady makes guys on their team who are okay NFL players, not great NFL players, but guys who are okay NFL players, much better NFL players. Guys like Chigakonkwo and Tajay Spears and Peter Skoronski, because Brady will get the ball out faster. So the fact that Dan Moore stinks at left tackle, that's fine. Brady knows it. He adjusts. But I also think, again, it would be unrealistic to try to compare Cam Ward to Tom Brady in his 20th year in the league. But what bothers me about the idea now about this roster so bad, Jared, what did you expect? Is that I knew the roster was bad in March. And I think you knew the roster was bad in March. And I think they knew the roster was bad in March. The difference is that's when I said, don't draft Cam. You are not ready for him. You need to take the trade with the Giants. You need to sign a veteran quarterback. You need to stabilize the position, which is the word Mike Borgonzi used when he got the job from Kansas City and he talked about Alex Smith. You need to stabilize the position. You need to build out the roster. And then when you're ready, take your swing. But instead, the Titans just decided to draft Cam Ward, knowing that the state of the roster was bad. Now, let's use Patrick Mahomes as the example here. Because, again, that's what people kept telling me was, he's Mahomes, Jared. When it comes to Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid drafted Mahomes and said that night he's not ready and sat him on the bench. Then, when Andy Reid decided he was ready and he put Mahomes in there, he had the best tight end in the NFL, Travis Kelce, the fastest wide receiver in the NFL, Tyreek Hill, and the former number 1 overall pick, Eric Fisher, at left tackle. That is a far cry from sticking Mahomes out there with Mason Kenzie. And I never understood how in this dream fantasy world where Cam Ward is Patrick Mahomes, I never understood how the Titans could take the exact opposite approach to nurture Cam Ward as Kansas City did, the way they nurtured Patrick Mahomes, and then expect the exact same results. So Kansas City did this very detailed, very organized, very patient, again, I just thought incredibly well thought out plan for Patrick Mahomes. The Titans are going to draft Cam Ward because they think Cam Ward can be the next Mahomes. Just like some of you people out there thought Cam Ward could be the next Mahomes. Now you are some of the people out there, the Cam boys, that are saying, whoa, pump the brakes. We need more time. But you're doing the exact opposite of what Kansas City did to develop Mahomes, and you're expecting Mahomes-like results, and that was never going to work. That, I don't think, would have worked with Patrick Mahomes. I don't think it worked with Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. He's not ready. Go ahead and stick him out there. I watched Cam Ward's tape, and I saw a first-round quarterback when I watched Cam Ward's college tape. But there's a difference between first-round quarterback and Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence or Jaden Daniels or Drake May. I saw highlight reel plays of that backyard football, which, let me say, that cannot be coached. That is a special skill. The ability Cam has to run around and then just step on one foot and launch a ball 40 yards down the field, that is something that not a lot of dudes can do. Josh Allen can do it. Mahomes can do it. A couple of guys can do it. Most guys don't do it. He can do it. So I saw the highlight reel plays too. But at the same time, I also saw a quarterback who was short, who was inaccurate, and who held on to the ball too long. And maybe you could sit there and tell me when it comes to Cam that, hey, he overcame all those things in college and carried Miami to the national championship. But he wasn't a perpetual winner in college. Washington State didn't win shit. Miami didn't get to an ACC title game. So, again, going back to the original point, if the roster was so bad, why did the Titans not make the trade with the Giants in order to get more picks so that they could build the roster so that when they did take a swing at a young quarterback, it wasn't a roster that nobody could win with, Jared, not even Tom Brady? Somebody explain that to me. Because that was the argument and the fight that I had in March of last year. When people like Buck, and I'll give Buck credit because Buck's over here criticizing Cam Ward when most people are afraid to do it. Buck's criticizing Cam Ward, but he was tweeting out in March, Cam Ward or else. And I'm like, he's not that good, folks. Like, I watched his tape. He's fine. But number one pick on a horrible team? No. No, can't do that. So, again, you can do whatever you want to do. You can use the state of the roster as a crutch to make up for why Cam sucks so bad. And he does suck right now. According to Pro Football Focus, he is currently 28 of 28 with a 54.9 passing grade amongst qualified passers. By the way, Jackson Dart is 19th. Cam is 28th out of 28 amongst qualified passers. The list of names that are above Cam, it's shocking. Like, it's actually kind of embarrassing. I tweeted it out earlier today. I tweeted out the whole list. Matthew Stafford right now is the number one quarterback in the NFL as far as the passing grades are concerned. Sam Darnold, number 2. Cam is 28. Geno Smith is 26. He sucks. Justin Fields is 22. He sucks and has been benched. He can't throw. Spencer Rattler is 21. He's been benched. I mean, these are some shitty quarterbacks we're talking about, and they are light years ahead of Cam Ward, according to PFF. So use the crutch of the roster or Brian Callahan's stupidity or whatever. But you can do that to make yourself feel better right now, or you can embrace the truth, which is, if it's so bad, if the state of this team is so bad, then why did they think Cam Ward would flourish with it? And if you can give me that answer, and if you can explain to me why you would take Cam Ward, knowing this roster was that bad, knowing this roster was this far away, if you can explain to me how you would expect him to have success in it, then maybe you can explain to me what the Titans are doing. Because right now, the guys who did something that was nonsensical to me at the time, putting Cam on this terrible team and expecting Cam to be a successful quarterback, they're the ones that are going to try to fix it. And again, I think anybody could have seen how bad the state of this team was going to be and could see that this is going to set a young quarterback up to fail. Again, the distinguished gentleman says, it's a thing called the future. Again, I understand that you don't draft to see how good the guy's going to be the next year. You also draft hoping that the team will improve. And this team is not improved. And the quarterback play is not improved. So I don't know what they got out of it. Nothing about this team is improved. Well, Jared, the state of the roster says, and I know you guys love to do it, but the roster was bad last year too. And in the offseason, a general manager has the ability to make a roster better. And this team has not done that. With the exception of Dan Moore, who I do think Dan Moore at one tackle and Latham, who I know has had his struggles at the other tackle, I think they are better than PT and trying to put a 370-pound J.C. Latham at left tackle. Okay, let's get into your reaction. Steve says, so do you think Cam can get better? See, that is a very Joe Rexrode-like question, because Joe Rexrode's response to that would be, well, do I think he can get better? So Cam's gonna get better because he can't play worse. But do I think Cam can become a good quarterback? I don't think he can. I think Cam is a backup quarterback. You know, when Rick Spielman was doing his comps, when he was still doing the CBS podcast before he went to go work with the Jets, he was asked for a comp on Cam Ward, and he said Malik Willis, Tyrod Taylor. I think Cam's better than Malik Willis was coming out, but I think that's probably the upside for Cam Ward, that it's probably Tyrod Taylor. And Tyrod Taylor is essentially a backup. So do I think Cam can be better than he is now, where he's the worst quarterback in the league? Yeah, I think he can be better than that. Do I think he can be better to where he's an elite franchise quarterback? I do not think that. And the reason why I don't think Cam can do it is because I don't think Cam will ever be accurate enough with the ball in order to consistently make game-winning plays. Like that throw to Chig. How many times can he make that throw in a row? I think if the exact same play happened, 3rd and 16, ball's got to come out. I have to put it at the spot. I have to hope Chig wins against the corner and gets out there, and I got to put it where I think Chig's going to be. How many times do I think Cam can just drop it in the bucket like that? 1 or 2 out of 10. And you cannot succeed in the NFL if you are not accurate with the ball as a starting quarterback. And a lot of guys, I know Josh Allen's the exception here, but a lot of guys do not become more accurate throughout the course of their career. One guy says, you come off so petty about Cam, I question if you would cover it straight if Cam played good or okay. Well, how about this? Let's let Cam Ward play well first, and then we'll see how I'd cover it. I'd like to think I'm a pretty straight shooter. I mean, I was on Jeffrey Simmons' ass all last season. Was I not? I was on his ass. And I was on his ass all off season, to the point that he was tweeting out fake quotes attributed to me. And if you noticed, I haven't really criticized Jeffrey Simmons much this year. You want to know why? Because he's playing his ass off. That's why. I've got a saying, if you don't like it, play better. You're sitting there saying, well, if Cam played well, you wouldn't say anything good about it. Well, first of all, I don't believe that. I'd like to think I'm a straight shooter. But more importantly, let's let Cam play well, and then we can have the discussion. Rusty says, what do you think Floyd would say about Cam? See, I don't think that that's a fair question to ask me because I don't know what Floyd would say about Cam. I know this. I know when Floyd drafted a project quarterback with the 3rd overall pick in the draft in 1995, he went to the media. I've got the cut on my computer. He went to the media and he said, we are not playing him for 2 years. So don't ask. And with Cam, it's like, we're going to throw him out there, bad habits and all, and just say, go get him, buddy. And I don't think he would have thought that that was a good idea. Again, I don't want to speak for him, but we also do have to remember times have changed. You know, a lot of people say Troy Aikman wasn't that good at the beginning of his career, and that's true. And Troy played on a terrible team. But in today's NFL, where the rookie wage scale has a positive, you don't have to pay a rookie $1 gazillion right away, and a negative, you've only got Cam for 4 years, a 5th year with the option, you have to start making decisions. And these are big money decisions. So, for instance, when Jimmy Johnson benched Troy Aikman in favor of Steve Berline in the 1991 playoffs, if that were to happen, that was Troy's 3rd year. At the end of the season, the Cowboys would decline Troy Aikman's 5th year option. It's a different ballgame. It's a different era. It's different how you treat things. Now you've got to make it within 2 years. If you don't make it within 2 years, everybody that picked you is fired, and the next guys are already thinking ahead. That's exactly what happened in New York with Daniel Jones. Brian Dable and Joe Shane got there thinking we're going to go pick Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. Then Daniel Jones won a bunch of games, and they were kind of fucked. But it's a totally, totally different era. Adam in Portland, my guy, says the crutch of the roster. You're a knucklehead. You need shit to talk about. I get it. Talk about the coaching search or the dumbass executives. He had 0 chance this year. So I agree with you that the dumbass executives, and again, I like Mike Borgonzi. I'm not convinced he's a moron. I'm also not convinced that he knows what he's doing. We'll see. The thing that bothers me the most is that they thought they could put Cam on this team and that they were going to have success with it. That's what bothers me. Because at the end of the day, I just didn't see what they saw. And now we've got half of a season in front of us, and he's the worst quarterback in the NFL. And a lot of people are asking me to ignore the fact that he's the worst quarterback in the NFL and make excuses as to why he's the worst quarterback in the NFL. Not that he might not be good enough. And again, I mean, it might be everybody else's fault. That is a possibility. But I'm not really interested in excuses when I unretire Warren Moon's jersey for somebody. So there is something I want to get to, and I know that a lot of people are weighing in here on the chat, and I do want to get to some more of your chats, but we got to talk about George Pickens. So last night, I am not a fantasy football player, technically. And for years, I looked at fantasy football as if fantasy football was beneath me. As if, like, hey, fantasy football, the casuals freaking love it, but I'm too serious around. I don't care about fantasy football. And people would say to me, who should I start at receiver this week? And I'm like, I don't give a shit. Start whoever you want. It doesn't bother me. Then Lindsay last year joined a fantasy football league, and she didn't really know much about football, so she needed help. So I helped her out a little bit. Now we are firmly invested in our fantasy team, which for the second year in a row features George Pickens. And yesterday, Lindsay won because of George Pickens and the night that he had. And I think we need to have a conversation about the Titans roster, how they get better players, and where George Pickens may or may not fit in. So the truth of the matter when it comes to the roster, and I know the Titans want to tell you draft, develop, retain. I know they want to tell you that. I know that they're not going to come out and say, we are going to spend a shitload in free agency this upcoming offseason, because they did that 2 years ago and it didn't work. Now, keep in mind, the guy who spent the money was a complete moron, but that's neither here nor there. So the Titans are not going to try to sell you on free agency as a way to fix this team. But it is inevitable that if the Titans are going to fix this roster, they are going to have to do some real heavy lifting in free agency, whether they like it or not, whether they believe in it or not, whether you believe in it or not. And here's an example of why. On offense, going into next season, the Titans will need a right guard because Kevin Zeitler's a free agent, a tight end because Chigakonkwo's a free agent, and I'm not convinced as a starter, and probably 2 wide receivers. I'm okay with penciling in Chimere Dike as the starting slot receiver next year. But if they release Calvin Ridley, which most people think they will, I'm not totally convinced they will or should. That's a different discussion. But if they release Calvin Ridley, they're going to need 2 starting receivers. So a starting right guard, a starting tight end, and 2 starting receivers. And that's before we even get to the bell cow running back that we know they all need. Then on defense, we know they need a pass rusher and a good one. And they desperately need corners. I heard PK say last week, the Titans have a cornerback crisis because it's so bad out there with Baker and Armour Davis and those Scarbinis. Well, right now the Titans have 2 picks in the top 60 of the draft. So how do you build your team? You have to use free agency, and you have to use it effectively, like they did when they signed Ben Jones and Rashard Matthews, and they traded for DeMarco Murray, and a year later they added Logan Ryan, and they would eventually add Roger Saffold. Like, those are important pieces to the team. So was the trade for Ryan Tannehill. You're going to have to do that. And you're going to have to excel in all 3 areas to build your team because you have so many holes. You're going to have to excel in the draft. You're going to have to sign and spend appropriately in free agency. And you're going to have to make some trades. Which takes me to the most intriguing name in free agency, which I think is George Pickens of the Dallas Cowboys. George Pickens last night had 9 catches for 144 and a touchdown. He is a beast. The problem with George Pickens is that while he's a great player, he is also certifiably insane. And I watched him last night. And when I was watching him run with the football, and when I was watching him go up for the ball, and when I was watching him compete for it, I'm like, you know who he reminds me of as a player? He kind of reminds me of Jamar Chase. Like, when I watch George Pickens at his best, I see Jamar Chase. And in most cases, you can't just go get a Jamar Chase. Now, on the field, off the field, his production and distraction reminds me of Antonio Brown. Now, I'm not saying I expect Pickens to get charged for attempted murder like AB did, but he is nuts, just like AB. And the GM used to always say, a guy's only available for one of 4 reasons. Bad player, which we know Pickens is not. bad guy, too much money, or injured. The reason why George Pickens is out there is because George Pickens is nuts. If George Pickens gets to free agency, and I know the Cowboys could tag him for about $30 million, but if George Pickens were to get to free agency, he would be by far the best option the Titans could bring in at wide receiver. You and I both know the Titans need a number one wide receiver. And they also need a number one edge rusher. And they also need a tight end for their young quarterback and a bell cow running back that they can turn around and hand the ball to 23 times in a game. Not this. Tony Pollard gets a couple of carries. Tajay Spears gets a couple of carries. But I'm talking about a bell cow. And you don't have 7 first-round picks. So it's not like you can draft Reuben Bain and draft Jordan Tyson and draft Jeremiah Love. That's not how it works. If you draft Reuben Bain, the edge rusher out of Miami, who might be the best player in the class, you now cannot get a number one receiver in the draft. But again, we all know George Pickens is crazy. And I mean crazy. Now, Jerry Jones is cool with that. The problem with Jerry Jones is that George Pickens, when he hits free agency, George Pickens is going to probably get somewhere around $30 million a year. And that's what Jerry's not cool with. Jerry probably loves George Pickens right now because he's making $3.6 million. Well, now multiply that by 10. And as we learned with Micah Parsons, that's not where Jerry likes to live. So, Jerry is cool with crazy. Andy Reid in Kansas City, he's cool with crazy. Mike Vrabel doesn't love malcontents, but Stephon Diggs is a huge part of their success in New England. Trust me, the Cardi B stuff, the pink baggies on the boat, Vrabel does not like that. But Vrabel knew, I got to get a receiver for Drake May or else he's throwing to Pop Douglas. So he brought in Stephon Diggs. And he's been a huge part of their success. So are you cool with that or are you not? Because if you're the Titans, according to Spot Track, George Pickens' market value is at $29.4 million a year. Now, you're going to have to pay the you suck tax in order to get George Pickens. So you're looking at a 4-year deal at about $30 million a crack, which is now $120 million. And you'd probably have to guarantee the first 2 years of that, maybe a little extra. And this is committing to a guy who didn't play on the first series last night because he was benched for skipping meetings or whatever it was that Brian Schottenheimer wouldn't allude to. And I have to ask, if this locker room couldn't handle Jarvis Brownlee Jr., how could it handle George Pickens? But these are the discussions that have to be had. Because, again, you have to get a number one receiver in here. And most teams, with the exception of you, don't just trade away number one receivers. So George Pickens is going to be a free agent. I doubt Jerry's going to pay $30 million on the tag. So George Pickens is going to be a free agent. There's going to be a market for him because some of these teams, some of these coaches, owners, etc., they don't care about a guy and his chemistry and everything else. They're like, no, we can coach him. And you need a number one receiver. So if you say no thank you to George Pickens and you draft Avril Reese out of Ohio State or Reuben Bain out of Miami, well, now you have to go sign Alec Pierce and pay him number one money or Romeo Dobbs and pay him number two money when neither of those guys are in the same zip code as George Pickens. And I don't love the fact that with George Pickens, he's a total nutcase, but it would be a discussion that would have to be had. And I don't know enough about him. I just know that Mike Tomlin couldn't deal with him anymore. So make of that what you will. Daniel says, What is it with these wide receivers in Pittsburgh? Antonio Brown, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. First of all, I think Pittsburgh does an incredible job of developing wide receivers. I also think that for some reason in the draft process, they overlooked the headache guys. Daniel also says, we don't have the culture for George Pickens. See, that's the problem. You don't have the team for the rookie quarterback, so you're going to draft him, and that's going to set him up to fail. And you don't have the culture for the good receiver, so you can't sign him. So now you have to draft the receiver, or you're going to go stick Alec Manor out there, and you're going to go play a team that has George Pickens at wide receiver when you have Alec Manor. It's tough. That's tough. And the example that I would, I guess, compare Pickens to here, not that Pickens has had the injury issues, but I would compare him to L'Jarius Sneed, where L'Jarius Sneed got his money and L'Jarius Sneed was done giving a rat's ass about football after that. And with Pickens, that absolutely has to be a fear. If you commit $60 million of guaranteed money to him, is he then going to go completely off the reservation? Because he's flirted with it a couple of times when he hasn't gotten the big contract. And that is, I think, very risky. But you put yourself in that position by not taking the Giants trade and by not trying to build out your team before getting a quarterback. Daniel says, include Garrett Wilson in a Jets trade back. They're not trading Garrett Wilson. Like, let's say that the Jets end up with the 5th pick and you have the 1st pick and Mendoza's the top quarterback on the board and Dante Moore goes back to Oregon. And all of these guys are trying to call up and they're saying, hey, we'll give you whatever you want draft picks wise to move up from 1 to 5. And you're like, I want Garrett Wilson. They're going to sit there and say, we need Garrett Wilson for the young quarterback. Like, they're not stupid like you, where you just take the young quarterback with no infrastructure for him to succeed at all. Carolina did that. They traded DJ Moore, and that was a complete and total fuck up on their part because now they left the young quarterback out to dry. Whew. Crazy talk. All right, let's get to the drama and the latest surrounding college football. So James Franklin has been hired at Virginia Tech to be their next head coach. That's not really much of a surprise. If you were paying attention over the weekend, it was pretty obvious that Virginia Tech was trying to land Franklin and that Franklin was 90% there, but he was flirting for something more. And I don't know what the something more was. I don't know if it was a commitment in recruiting. I don't know if it was salary demands or even the salary negotiation, the buyout negotiation that he was dealing with on the Penn State front. But Franklin was playing footsie with Virginia Tech. There was Arkansas over here lurking as a possibility, and I think Franklin would have been a good fit at Arkansas. I still think Arkansas should go hire John Gruden. I think I'm the only person in the world that believes that, but I think they should hire John Gruden because I think he'd bring excitement and buzz to Fayetteville, and I think the rednecks down there would like that more than they would like James Franklin and his brand of bullshit. That said, what's the upside here with James Franklin going to Virginia Tech? If you're Virginia Tech and you want to be relevant in the ACC again, well, that's not going to take a lot because there aren't very good schools in the ACC. And every year it kind of feels like there's about 1 of 6 schools that might be the best school in the ACC. One year it's Florida State. The next year it's Clemson. Then there's SMU. This year, it looks like that team could have been Virginia. And so it goes from school to school, kind of like a pinball thing. It should be Miami with the resources that Miami has, but Mario Cristobal's a numbnuts down there, and he always seems to lose games that he shouldn't. So, again, Franklin can get to the playoff out of the ACC. But can he really win a championship at Virginia Tech? And Virginia Tech, I know they say they've got resources. Everybody says they have resources. What resources does Virginia Tech have that Penn State didn't? What resources does Virginia Tech have that Miami doesn't have, that Clemson doesn't have, that Louisville doesn't have, that SMU doesn't have? What advantage does Franklin have there? And then, again, can James Franklin actually win a national title? I mean, I know we talk about James Franklin and the fact that James Franklin didn't win the big games when he was at Penn State. He only played 1 or 2 of those a year. Well, in the ACC, you'll play one or two of those a year at Virginia Tech. I'm not going to completely doubt James Franklin because I watched James Franklin work a miracle at Vanderbilt, and that was in the old days when Vanderbilt couldn't pay the players. So I do have to give him that. But I'm just not sure I see the upside for James Franklin in going to Virginia Tech. I do think that it'll get me to pay more attention to Virginia Tech, but I have a hard time thinking, yeah, now Virginia Tech is going to compete for the national title with James Franklin. And then there's the Lane Kiffin drama. And holy shit, was this an SEC made for Jimmy Sexton TV drama? So if you were following yesterday, all these reports came out that Lane Kiffin's family was being wooed by LSU in Baton Rouge. That on Sunday, they went to Gainesville and they got wooed by Florida. And then on Monday, they went to Baton Rouge and they got wooed by LSU. Now, Kiffin, to his credit, has had a very good canned answer every time he's been asked about these jobs. And he says, well, I'm focused on the next day and the next game because if you lose one game, you're out of the top 10. If you lose 2 games, you're out of the top 25. And if you lose 3 games, you're fired. Got it. But Kiffin can say whatever he wants. He absolutely is flirting with LSU and with Florida. And this is a total concoction on the part of Jimmy Sexton, who wants everybody to know that Lane is flirting with LSU and Lane is flirting with Florida. Now, it came out yesterday that apparently Ole Miss has given Lane Kiffin an ultimatum that they want to know by the Egg Bowl, are you in or are you out? Which would be their next game. Are you in or are you out? To which I would say, what are they going to do? Fire him? Now, if they had some real balls, then they would say, here's the deal, Lane. This is our final offer. And if you don't accept it by the Egg Bowl, go to LSU, go to Florida, and we'll hire somebody else. But I don't think Ole Miss is going to do that. Because I think the biggest thing for Ole Miss is they are scared to death of becoming Mississippi State. They've had a taste of irrelevance, and I think they are scared to death with the idea of being irrelevant again. And I understand. Ole Miss is a legitimate program with Kiffin as the coach. And if he leaves, you're not just going to go get another Lane Kiffin. That said, Kiffin went on today on the McAfee show and was like, there was no ultimatum and this was all made up and I'm focused on 1-0 today and all of that. I'll just say this. I don't think Lane Kiffin's that good of a coach. Am I crazy for thinking that? I mean, LSU fired a coach who was good and got good results, but he just could never get it over the top. He couldn't get Notre Dame over the top, and he went to LSU, and he couldn't get them over the top. But I'm supposed to believe Lane Kiffin, who lost at home to Kentucky last year, and that's what kept them out of the college football playoff, is now all of a sudden going to go to LSU and do better than he's ever done in the SEC. I have a hard time believing that. Same with Florida. I also have a hard time believing that Lane Kiffin, after all the equity that he's built up in Oxford as their coach, where he could absorb a losing season or two, that he is all of a sudden going to sacrifice that for a couple of million extra more and have to deal with all of the drama and speculation and the heater that is LSU or Florida. Truth be told, I think this whole Lane Kiffin drama, whatever you want to call it, I think this is all Jimmy Sexton trying to get the best deal out of Ole Miss. I think Lane has told Jimmy Sexton, you get the best deal out of Ole Miss, and we're going to take it. If LSU offers 12 and Ole Miss offers 10.5, we're going to take the 10.5. So get the best deal possible. And I think this is Jimmy using the bye week that Ole Miss has so it's not a distraction for the game, saying, okay, now you have to let me work my magic. Now you have to let me get LSU involved, get Florida involved, so we can get the best offer from Ole Miss. And I don't know who leaked the ultimatum out there, if that came from Sexton or if that came from Ole Miss, but it sounds to me like if there was an ultimatum or a threat of an ultimatum or something like that, they're going to give their best offer before the Egg Bowl. I think Lane stays at Ole Miss. I also couldn't help myself but laugh at the idea that Louisiana's governor came out and was like, we will never, ever have a contract as bad as that Brian Kelly contract ever did. And you need to investigate these agents. You need to investigate them because they're all representing the same coaches. And yet here's LSU. If you're going to get Lane Kiffin, you're going to have to give Lane Kiffin a huge buyout. Here's LSU flirting with Lane Kiffin and Jimmy Sexton. I thought the governor was putting a stop to that. Or maybe it's just a campaign pitch. All right, that's it for us. We are out of here today. The Predators have not fired Andrew Burnett. I am starting to lose all faith. Not that I still had a ton left, but I'm starting to lose whatever faith I had in Barry Trotz. I'm starting to completely lose that as the days continue to go by, that they do not change the coach. As I have said, if they change the coach, we will go live. Now, if they do it tonight, I will not go live because I will be at the BMG CMA party tonight. And we're very, very excited about the CMA Awards in town. But that said, we will go live whenever Andrew Burnett ultimately gets fired. It should have been yesterday. It should have been earlier today. We shall see. That's it for us. Like and subscribe. Stillman and Company. We'll see everybody live tomorrow.